Howdy partners, today we're going to talk about cross-country bike tires because if you ain't first, you're last.
If you ain't first, you're last.
So in front of me are our favorite Maxxis cross-country light trail tires. There is a ridiculous amount of tires available on the market these days, so it can be super confusing. Most of the time on this channel, we're talking about trail and enduro bikes, and we've done a million videos on tires for that kind of thing. But plenty of you guys out there are still riding cross-country bikes, meaning 4-inch travel bikes or hardtails or rigid bikes, and you want something a little bit more lightweight, fast-rolling, and want to know which ones are good. So that's what we're going to dive into today. These are our absolute favorites for that cross-country sort of light trail category. And I'm going to break down sort of how each one sort of makes sense, what the use case might be, and then also give you some recommended setups dependent on your terrain. So I'm going to go from the most lightweight, fast-rolling tire to sort of the least, a little bit more towards that trail bike end. To start off with is the Ikon. So Ikon is one of the most common cross-country Maxxis tires. It's a super lightweight tire, super fast-rolling, low knobs, packed in nice and tight. This thing is really good for loose over hard pack in dry conditions. It is not a good mud tire. So if you're in dry conditions and you want a lightweight, fast-rolling tire, this thing is amazing. I've seen, depending on what you're going for, traction and speed and weight-wise, you can run this thing front and rear, and it's going to be incredibly fast. If you're in dry conditions and you want to pair this thing with a little bit more traction up front, my recommendation would be to do either an Ardent Race, a little bit more grip right there and still pretty darn fast, or you can go a little further this way, do a Recon or an Ardent. But if you're running this in the rear, an Ardent Race in the front is a pretty good setup for like really fast, dry conditions. If you're in a little bit more wet conditions and you're dealing with sort of just more moist soil where you're riding that kind of tends to cling to your tires a bit more, the Aspen Killer rear tire, it's similar to the Ikon in terms of weight and rolling resistance, but the knobs are a lot more spaced out, so it clears mud a lot better. So again, better in the wet. And then pairing it with a Forekaster, Forekaster again, more spaced out knobs, so it's gonna work better in wet conditions and just clear mud better. So this Forekaster in the front and your Aspen in the rear is probably a great setup if you're riding in wetter conditions. Next up, Ardent Race, Recon, Ardent, and Minion DHR2. So these things, again, now we're getting a little bit heavier, a little bit more grip. The way it works with tires, the more knobs you add, the wider that tire gets, the beefier it gets, the more durable it's going to be, the heavier it's going to be, the more traction it's going to have, but it's also going to be slower, right? So definitely keep that in mind. Again, we're talking more like the cross-country light trail tires. That was your lighter setups right there. We're going to go a little bit more into that like trail bikey setup, but also, you know, a lot of people, again, tires, what makes them a little bit confusing is that, you know, there's no set sewn rules here. If you want to run something with a little bit more grip on your XC bike, nobody's stopping you, so you can totally do that. A good setup that's a little bit more grippy and slightly heavier than what I just talked about. Ardent Race in the back and an Ardent in the front. So again, this is a pretty solid setup for drier conditions, maybe a little bit of a moist condition, but you probably wouldn't want to run this in a muddy scenario. Ardent Race is similar to the Ardent, but it's just got more packed in center knobs, a little bit lower knobs, and a little bit faster rolling. So a lot of times you're going to see on a trail bike an Ardent in the front and an Ardent Race in the back. Good setup right there. Recon is pretty similar, kind of in between those two. I really like this as a rear tire. EXO casing I think is awesome. That's what I have on my own bike here. This is not a cross-country bike, but I would call it a light trail bike. It's a 4.5-inch travel bike, Yeti SB 4.5. I'm always running a Recon and a 2.4 in the back. I love it. I feel like it rolls fast. It gets good climbing traction, and it's just like a good versatile tire. So good rear tire in my opinion is a Recon. I pair it with a DHR2. DHR2 is definitely not a cross-country tire. It's more of a downhill enduro tire, but they do make it in this size right here, which is a 2.3. So it's a little bit, it's probably on like the very end of like a trail bike tire size before you get into that enduro bike, which might be like 2.35 and up. I like this setup, DHR2 in the front, Recon in the back. Again, this is probably more of like your trail bike. But if you wanted to throw this on your cross-country bike or your hardtail for a little bit more added traction, this is a killer setup. So yeah, hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more understanding of tires. We're going to probably dive into some more of these and look at all the different brands. Of course, you got other brands out there like WTB and Schwalbe that are also making great cross-country tires, but Maxxis is a pretty huge brand and makes amazing stuff and has such a wide selection of tires, so we wanted to keep it simple for this video and just show you our favorite tires for cross-country and light trail from Maxxis, and sort of good combos right there. Check below in the video description if you want to see sort of these recommendations and pairs broken down and links and more imagery and weights and all that sort of stuff. There's going to be an article that goes along with this that has a lot more details. If you want to know more about Maxxis tires and the whole setup, check out the Maxxis tire guide right there. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.